Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is said that the next best thing to eating is talking about it. And that's what we'll do now, although it is getting closer to lunch, or you're maybe even getting a little bit hungry, but we'll talk about it. Food is, as we've heard, amazing. Food brings people together for our daily meals, when we're happy, when we're sad. We have our likes and dislikes of food. Many of us take food for granted. But what we eat and how it is produced is a more serious business than most of us normally think about. It's not only about our health, it's about the health of our planet. It's about landscapes. It's about the livelihoods of each family living on the 570 million farms around the globe. It's actually about life and death. Producing food that is good for you, that is good for the farmers, and that's good for the planet is dependent on agricultural biodiversity. Not many are aware of that. Hardly anyone, in fact, knows how fundamentally important agricultural biodiversity is for humankind. And that is, as the President said, why Food Forever is established. And now let me introduce this distinguished panel that we have here. They are all then Food Forever champions, coming from very different backgrounds. You have already listened to Her Excellency, the President of Mauritius, not only a president, but as you also have heard, a professor of organic chemistry. We have Nicolas Moreau, head of Deutsche Asset Management, a truly global business leader. We have Alejandro Argumedo. He is program director of Asociación Andes, agronomist by training, and founder of a number of international indigenous knowledge platforms. And we have, all the way over there, Ruben Echeverria. He has a long background from agricultural research, and he's now the Director General of the International Center for Tropical Agriculture in Cali, in Colombia. We have already heard why Madam President got involved in Food Forever. So let me ask the rest of you, what was your personal motivation for getting involved in this initiative? I think I start out with maybe the most surprising one, the global business leader. Nicolas, what was your reason for getting involved?
So it's not because I'm French and I love foods, like many French.
That's what we thought.
But that could have been a reason. No, I've been, along all my career, involved a lot in sustainable investments. And investing in food diversity, investing in food development is something very important to the sustainability of the planet. And that's why I'm here, and I'm very happy to be there and explain how public can help and private can help to finance food diversity.
Excellent, and we'll hear more about it in a little while. Alejandro, why did you get involved?
Well, I come from Peru, the land of the Incas and the potato. My ancestors domesticated more than 120 plants. We have worked with communities in Cusco, in the potato park, and we're keeping around 1,500 varieties of potato. So target 2.5, it's at the core of what I do. And I think this initiative can help farmers, indigenous peoples, to keep that diversity that we have for creating sustainability and resilience.
Excellent. And Ruben, what's the motivation for the scientists?
First of all, thank you for inviting me. The main reason why I'm here is to learn from all of these presidents, scientists, professors, and experts on food systems. The real motivation to be here, Marie, is that I believe we need to raise awareness, as it was said earlier today, outside this room of experts, on what's going on with the conservation and use of genetic agro-biodiversity out there. I work in a research center, in a research system, public, international, and I still, it's hard to believe when people really think that food is produced in supermarkets or it comes from the refrigerator, as we say usually. So the main motivation is how all of this list of bullets, all the bad news that Bob Watson was showing, and some good news, the important part of the list to me is that they all happen at once. It never happens in humanity before, having those billions, including the 2 billion hidden hunger and the food waste and all of that. So how we can conserve and use all that huge storage of genetic biodiversity that we have in those gene banks, in the research centers, is the main motivation and the reason why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are, of course, unfortunately, losing agrobiodiversity every day. It is one of today's most serious environmental concerns. It does really undermine global food security. And let's just bring up a few facts. For certain plant species, we have lost more than 90% of diversity over recent years. Take the United States. They have lost in the field more than 93% of their fruit and vegetable varieties. In China today, they only use like 10% of the rice varieties that they used to use in 1950. Today, 75% of the world's food is generated from only 12 plant species and 5 animal species. More than the 50,000 edible plant species in the world, less than 200 contribute significantly to our food supply. And just 3 crops, rice, maize, and wheat, contribute to nearly 60% of the calories of plants that we as a global community take in every day. So the loss of genetic diversity within crops and the reduced number of species commonly grown makes us quite simply extremely vulnerable. It makes us extremely vulnerable for climate change, for a new pest, for a new disease, for developing plants that have a taste that we like in the future. For each variety we lose, each of the 4,500 varieties of potatoes, or for each of the 200,000 varieties of rice that we lose, for each one of those we lose options for the future. So Food Forever, then, is about uniting various stakeholders to fight that loss, to make sure that we increase diversity and use, and thereby also resilience in our food systems. So now this panel represents an amazing variety, certainly diverse sectors. And my next question to them then is quite simply, what is it that your sector, the sector that you represent, what is it that can contribute to promote and make sure that we safeguard biodiversity and thereby create more resilient food systems? And I think, again, I would like to start with the private sector and the financial sector. Nicolas, what is it that the financial sector can contribute more concretely?
I think we can help to have investors to put their money at work in the right place. And I think here, private-public is very important because we can collaborate together, either to have a leverage effect. So when the public sector gives some guarantees, and we have done that with the UN Climate Change Fund, where they guarantee some project, and we can have investors that would put more money at work. And then we can have an effect, a multiplier effect, which is 1 to 4 or 1 to 5, which is a good way to get more fund at work. It's also a way to have projects that we could not finance otherwise to get financed because they are too risky or because they are going in places where we cannot access. So that's things that we are doing with some banks in Africa, where in fact we are refinancing them and they are distributing microcredits to local SMEs or local farmers. And without the public sector, we would not be able to access these people, these projects, with associations also. But we can bring financing to make this happen. So I think that working together, either with association or with public institution like UN, then we can make this work for both parties and get more impact. And that's, I think, where we have a role to play, and it's a very important role.
But do you think, are investors really interested in agriculture? Is that your understanding?
Yeah, we have a fund that we've just raised that invests in Africa, which is $160 million. So
okay.
It's just
real.
perhaps the beginning, but yeah, we can find ways to do it. There are many investors that are interested in putting their money at work in places that are, making good for the planet or for people.
And then in order to develop these public-private partnerships, Madam President, you also need the governments on board. How do you see the role of governments in safeguarding biodiversity, and how can you work with the private sector in this?
Thank you, Mary. I'll just link up to what Nicola has just said. As far as I'll bring it again to on the African continent, where we are very aware that any kind of increase in the yield of agricultural productivity will bring millions out of absolute poverty. And we're increasingly looking for investment in this sector. Now, in terms of government, and again, I bring this discussion to the fact that biodiversity underpins life on Earth. Biodiversity is found in these countries where perhaps we are economically not very strong. So whenever there's any kind of hang-up, it's the research, it's this kind of budget that gets short shrift. So I think we are increasingly now going for a dialogue and a partnership, public and private partnership, public and private dialogue, where we have to convince, we have to speak the same language and bring the necessary funding to these initiatives, be it in ensuring research in the agricultural sector, also invest in extension, bring in advocacy, in everything we can do, but also at the end of the day ensuring food security for all. So it's a must. And of course, it's a debate which we can no longer ignore. We need to have this conversation increasingly and bring all the actors on board so that we can make this happen on the ground.
And that is, of course, also the idea behind UN SDG 17. It said very clearly that we can't implement the UN SDGs unless we have all parties on board. And we got to find also a way for private and public sector to work more concretely together and go beyond talk. Because it has been a lot of talk, but the challenge is then how exactly do we do it? And that's a conversation we need to continue. But let me go to science then, Ruben. What can science do to contribute to safeguarding biodiversity and making sure that we use it in such a way that decision makers and the general population understand how important it is?
I think science, of course I'm biased, I work in agricultural research, but I think it has a lot to contribute. Despite all of these concerns about all of this bad news, I am a pragmatic, optimistic. And when I see the pipeline of what's coming from our public, international, and national agricultural research, it's fantastic. And I will give you just a couple of examples. It's fantastic because if we believe that we are going to reach the UN goals on sustainable development in 15 years, to have a healthy diet, you need a healthy food system behind, producing the right quality food, not the quantity of food that we've been fixed for too long because of population growth. The main driver has been on quantity. Now, so from the research pipeline, there are many things happening. For example, how to conserve agrobiodiversity better, how to manage those collections. I'm not talking about the collections under the CGR umbrella under the FAO treaty. I'm talking about all the collections, how we can do the training, how we can manage that. That's very important. Perhaps we can do that more efficiently. So there's a lot of research on that front. Another one is on climate change. There's a lot going on in that library with those genomes of traits that could be fantastic to help us to adapt to climate change. If you have in Africa a growing season reduced by 20%, and research takes time, we need to understand quickly which traits do we need to use. Remember that we conserve biodiversity not like in a museum, we do that to use. So how we use that in a smart way. So on climate change, there is a lot going on in our pipeline in research, not only in the center I work, but in the community of international centers and elsewhere. There are also great business opportunities. So we should do more research to provide and promote this business key opportunity. Without the private sector, farming is a business. Without the private sector, we are not going to get there. Then on the mitigation part, I'm coming from a livestock country, so I feel a little guilty of my youth because too much beef. There's a lot of research going on mitigation these days, from tropical forages to many more. And also on the link on agriculture, nutritional health, and on biofortification, which we don't mention too often. Biofortification, I think, is a fantastic research way to improve iron, zinc, vitamin A in key crops. And many research organizations are working under a key program called Harvest Plus to do that, and it was mentioned recently. So I think the pipeline looks great. It takes some funding to get that pipeline outputs, outcomes, and impact. But for the first time in the last 5 or 6 years, I see a very strong research, public research pipeline coming to address all of these issues. So we are what we eat, but what we eat is changing. So our research portfolio should be dynamic and change depending on these big changes. And I see much more awareness. We are not following the inertia of the past, just producing more quantity of food. Improving varieties, higher yields, adapted to climate change, climate proof, as we call them, biofortified for key hotspots is very important. The last one is on the research side is how are we going to foresight on the biodiversity hotspots? Are we losing biodiversity, as you just mentioned in the beginning? So how do we know, how do we map that out in advance so we don't lose it so much? How do we research on the globalization of diets, which, as you know, they're getting globalized and much more small amount of foods that we're eating today compared to the past. So there's a lot of research going on, and I think after all of this conversation, this is my first time at IT, we can take a lot of inputs to improve our research.
You can create climate resilience, you can create higher nutritional value. It's all amazing what you can do with crop diversity, if you just are wise enough then to safeguard it. But it's the farmers, Alejandro, that in the end produce the food we need. What can farmers do to also safeguard diversity?
I want to pick up on what Ruben said, and I think science is not going to do it alone. We need a time-tested traditional knowledge, the wisdom of indigenous peoples and farmers. Now, farmers and indigenous peoples keep most of the biodiversity we have, most of the crops, cultivated plants, and animals are in the indigenous peoples and farmers' fields. And they do so by using strategies that are based on a profound respect to Mother Earth and in line with a long-term sustainability. And I think that is pretty much needed today. With climate change, with pollution, with water scarcity, the traditional knowledge and the wisdom of the indigenous peoples are not just relevant, but as Bob Watson said, pretty much needed today. And indigenous peoples can bring that wisdom. Farmers can bring the knowledge because they are always experimenting. The landscapes are the places where crops are evolving, where new traits, new expressions are being created by farmers. And I think that we can contribute with that. but also with the knowledge and that wisdom of sustainability that we need very much now.
Thank you very much. George Bernard Shaw has said, "There is no sincerer love than the love to food." True or not, we all eat. Food is part of our history, of our daily life, of our future. And I just want to ask all of you very quickly, because we're heading towards the end. I want to ask you, is there a favorite crop of food or a crop that you remember eating as a child that it's hard to find these days, or that completely has changed tastes? Or do you have a favorite crop? Ruben, quickly.
Well, I must say, very quickly, I must say that coming again from Uruguay, although I left 40 years ago, the food I remember the most, and I know this is not the right place to say it, is the most tender, tasty, grass-fed, no hormones, no cholesterol, no feedlot Uruguayan beef. So that's what I remember as food. Now, I know that this is not very environmentally friendly these days, but at those days, 50, 60 years ago when I was a kid, I can eat it without any environmental concern. Anyway, a lot has changed over that, so I remember that, and this is one of the reasons why I think more research is needed to understand how to mitigate climate change, how to change our diets, and not to go back to the good old times of the food that I remember.
Alejandro.
Let me close my eyes. Yeah, it's a black quinoa cake. My grandmother...
Black quinoa cake.
Yes, my grandmother used to make it grounded with cocoa beans. So delicious. But, there's more than 120 species of quinoa. And it's the diversity of quinoa is very huge in the Andes. Nonetheless, now you see in the market only 2 or 3. So we are losing it. We are losing it. And I think, we need to look at how we have to keep this. In 2013, there was the International Year of the Quinoa. And I think FAO did a good job in terms of awareness raising, because you see quinoa all over the world now. And that's what we need. We need some type of awareness raising so that target 2.5 in 2 years can be all over the world.
Nicola.
In fact, I would take your point the other way around. I found in my country, in France, that the food diversity have increased a lot. And if you take what we call the forgotten veggies, that's veggies that were brought up before World War II, and for 40, 50 years have been forgotten, and now we see them again. The big chefs in France and in other places have been making them trendy, and it has been diffused all over the place, and now we've got these roots, like rutabaga and stuff like that. I don't know if it means anything to anyone here, but this has mostly roots. And they are becoming, you see them now on markets, but it's forgotten veggies.
Exactly, and we'll just ask for more of them. We will wrap up here with the president. She can speak about her favorite food and send her the last blessing before we leave this podium. But let me just say that, the beauty of working with safeguarding biodiversity, that is that it can be done. It's politically possible, it's technically possible, it's economically possible. This can be done. And it can be done by 2020, basically, where the UNS asked us to deliver. So that's what we should go for. That's fundamental for mankind. Of course we'll deliver. And we do give the last word to the president, who is the chair of Food Forever, to very quickly wrap up.
So I'll just quickly mention my very favorite food. It's a leaf. It's the food that was considered to be the food for the poor. It's the moringa, which was, of course, underutilized. and now going mainstream, and we know how valuable and how useful, how nutritious these foods are. So just to wrap up quickly, Marie, I think the dialogue today has focused on the overarching importance of science as having the answer to food security, and it has the answer in terms of helping us conserve the very useful germplasm, the biodiversity, in the light of climate change. It will provide business opportunities as well to the farmers, but not forgetting that traditional knowledge has the possibility of creating the third way so as to add value between science and traditional ways of doing agriculture, and at the same time promote and increase the palette of food that can ensure food security for the rest of the planet. So I think this is the most important point I've taken, but not forgetting that public-private partnership is going to be key in addressing this dialogue and promoting food security, so that by 2020, Food Forever and, of course, our initiative will have delivered on Sustainable Development Goal 2.5. Thank you.